And that's when we look at a lot of best practices, right? It's their common practices, a much better word for it. Commonly, these do work well, but there's exceptions to all of these rules. And so it's understanding that you're in an exception and you want to go against it and say, you know what, we're not following best practice because it doesn't work for us. All right, we need to actually break it to do some of these things correctly. And that's when we think of best practices. They're really good starting places. I mean, they're great starting places. If you're going to teach someone new, right, the best practices are the place to start with because they do commonly work well. But this is why you want people with a user experience because they can look at the data. I mean, we're in paid search, right? At the end, the data tells us what to do. We're not the organic people who say, if we just build some more links, we'll get better rankings. And yeah, they do more than that. But they don't have to live by data every day. Right? Not the social ones. Let's go have a conversation. In the end, we say, show me the data. If you can't show me the data, I don't believe you. And if you don't like data, you should not be in paid search, right? This is that we start and live in the actual information. And so when the information says your best practice is wrong, you don't want to look at the best practice and say, well, my data must be wrong. Right? You have to believe in the data. You say, okay, my data says that in this case, my best practice isn't right, or my common practice, whatever you want to call it. We need to readjust and rethink it based on our data set, how we're going to go against that situation and how we're really going to take advantage of the fact that we're an exception in this particular case. And that's why you're new people, you want to train them on best practices. All right, this is what you need to do to get going. And then they're going to get some experience. They're going to start understanding how data tells stories, how the data shows you, yes, you're doing this correctly, or the data shows you, now you're trending downwards. You following this practice is making us actually make less money. So why is that? Right? What does the data show us that we need to break these best practices, break what everyone says is correct in our situation? And that's what experience in paid search really shows you, is when you have to go against these best practices. And there's a lot of exceptions. The most common reason that best practices fail is by far trying to simplify something that's a very complex problem. Because best practices are 1 and 2 and 3 lines of context, right? They don't say, do this except in situation A through Z. They say, do this. And that's where best practices start to fail, is when you say, these are very, very complex situations, and attribution is one of the most complex we could ever get into in paid search. And that's when we're simplifying something too far, right? And sometimes resource constraints is by far the second reason you break them. You know what's best, but you know that if you're one person, do you want to manage 3.5 million keywords by yourself? No, no one wants to manage 3.5 million keywords by themselves, right? You know this is just going to fail. Right? Not going to happen. If you're running a small agency and you want to manage 10,000 accounts, even if they're a small business by yourself, no. Right? Maybe 500 with good technology, maybe 1,000 with really, really good technology. No way one person should ever manage 10,000 accounts. Right? Not going to happen. And so that resource constraint's another really, really important thing to say, let's follow best practice to our top 20%. And then let's cut some corners so that we can actually manage things in a way that we can actually make good decisions, as opposed to just letting things ride for the rest of it. And there's some actual exceptions to best practices, but they're actually pretty rare. In most cases, best practices, they don't fail. They simplify a problem, or they don't look at resources. Sometimes they are failures. Those are true exceptions. And they make actually wonderful talks at places like this when you're running these true exceptions, because we love to break the rules, right? You love in paid search to say, we always do this. And everyone's like, no, right? Well, I remember this time when it didn't work this way because, right? We like to look at data and say, let's counteract it. Let's show you a different story, right? Because whenever you use always and never, that shows too much of a close-mindedness of thinking about when you need to move against the data, or when the data tell you the story, as opposed to you forcing the data to tell your story.